Hey everybody, this is Erica, the technology nerd who likes to film stuff, and these are the OnePlus 6. I have been using this phone constantly for a month now, and I'm ready to talk about it, the good, the bad, and the ugly. So here we go, OnePlus 6, 1 month later. Starting with the look and feel, I find these devices to be very beautiful. They feel really nice in the hand with buttons and sensors in all the right places, and they awesomely include a headphone jack. And what really attracts me to this phone are the interesting finishes. So we've got 3 different finishes. We've got mirror black, midnight black, and silk white. Now my favorite one is the mirror black because it feels the least slippery, and even though it's a fingerprint magnet, those fingerprints wipe away extremely easily, so it's a non-issue. And it also has the added advantage of being very reflective, so I can frame selfies with it, and it also acts as an impromptu mirror. The other 2 finishes are also fantastic as they feel and look like the metal of previous devices, but they're actually glass. It's just too bad that they don't include wireless charging with the addition of that glass. My thought is perhaps they are readying that for the 6T, which they'll probably release 6 months later. And of course, as I was filming this, they released a limited edition red that is absolutely stunning and has the same glossy back as the mirror black, but has a metallic finish underneath instead. The frame is an anodized red, leaving the mirror black as the only model with a high gloss frame, which I do find to be more susceptible to scratches than the others. Now, performance. This thing is fast. Stupid fast. It's very well optimized for moving about the interface and switching between apps. They have gotten this lickety-split sensation down to a science. We have 2 RAM configurations, 6GB and 8GB. Now I've only been able to test out the 8GB models, and I can keep a great deal of apps open. With everyday apps, I can get around 18 to 20 apps open before they start refreshing, and I monitored this to be around 4GB of RAM usage, so no, not all 8GB of RAM are being used. But, interestingly, RAM is being prioritized differently with games, as I can get well over 5GB nearing 6GB of RAM usage while keeping several games open at once. But how useful is this for most people? Not very. So unless you really need that extra RAM for gaming or want the 128GB storage model of the phone, I think you will be more than happy with the 6GB model. And even though we aren't using the full 8GB of RAM for everyday apps, I am still seeing a large enough advantage with multitasking over phones with only 4GB of RAM, where this extra RAM is useful and not just a gimmick. So moving right along, the OnePlus 6 has the Snapdragon 845 SoC and is completely proficient in gaming just like the other 845 flagships. And it actually has a slight graphical advantage at 1080p plus resolution because it has less pixels to push around, so I notice it keeping peak performance longer in graphic-intensive games versus its Quad HD Plus counterparts. So from what I can see, 1080p and the Snapdragon 845 SoC go well together. Interface-wise, this is very close to stock Android, which I love, with few but useful added features. And this is such as reading mode, which turns everything on the display to black and white for a more Kindle-like reading experience, and I find that it helps with eye fatigue during long reads. We've also got the gaming mode, which keeps unneeded distractions away, grants special gaming settings to optimize performance, and it also lets you route calls to the speaker. This is all in hopes that nobody breaks you from your gaming experience. You can customize your on-screen buttons with long and short actions, which I have always loved, or choose the order of your recent and back buttons. And now we are able to get rid of the on-screen navigation bar altogether and use gestures instead, such as swiping up from the bottom to get to the home screen that acts as your home button, swipe up and hold to get to recent applications, and then you can swipe up to the left or right of the bottom of the screen to go back. And with this new navigation feature, I can still access split screen easily, but I can no longer quickly switch between apps via the Recents button or access the Google Assistant by pressing and holding on the home button because we took them away, so I abandoned the feature pretty quickly. But for avoiding burn-in, this may just be the ticket. We've got screen-off gestures to bounce quickly into apps. We also have the coveted dark mode, which is just so much easier on the eyes and can even save a bit of power for phones with OLED displays. Finally, I noticed that the Do Not Disturb mode is no longer tied to the notification switch, which is actually really nice. So the switch now functions as volume on, vibrate, and silent, and you can keep the Do Not Disturb mode completely independent. So these are some really awesome interface features that I really like, but the OnePlus 6 is not perfect, and the most annoying interface decision that OnePlus made is to get rid of the always on display feature. And they did this in favor of the lift to display feature only, and this happened after the very first update. So according to OnePlus, this was due to battery life concerns. So apparently it was enough of a drain for them to want to get rid of this feature. But still, if you want to get it back, I will leave a link in the description to show how to do that according to XDA developers. Another unfortunate thing that I noticed is that the fingerprint gesture to pull down notifications is missing, and I would really like to have that back. So I went on a spree installing a bunch of third-party apps that usually bring that feature back, and none of them work. So I'm not too happy about that. Now looking at some security features, we have the fingerprint sensor, which is very fast and accurate, and the fingerprint sensor can also double as a shutter button when you're underneath the camera. We also have the face unlock feature, and it is so quick that it unlocks the phone before you even notice. Now unfortunately, some outlets have been able to trick it with a selfie photo, though most have not been able to reproduce this, so I'm really not that worried. As it is, face unlock can't be used for payments, and if you're at all concerned, just disable it and use the awesome fingerprint sensor on the back. Now moving right along to talking about the display. The screen is Diamond Pentile AMOLED, and it's 1080p plus resolution at 6.2 inches. And yes, there is a notch, but the screen is large, and it's immersive, and it gives a great experience. So yes, notch, but yes, I like the screen. And honestly, they have implemented this notch the best that I have seen so far. So when you tell this notch to go black, it stays black with just the pertinent information showing on either side of the notch. And it works this way across all applications. So to me, I have not found this notch to be annoying, and it's been a consistent experience throughout. I'd say the weird thing is, if you zoom in to full screen when viewing media, the curves of the active display don't match on either side. To me, that looks weird, and I am not a fan of that asymmetry. The screen is bright, and it's actually quite easy to see outdoors, and I've been pleasantly surprised. I've measured 462 nits for manual 100% brightness, and just below 670 nits for auto brightness. Now let's get to the technical stuff, looking at the screen calibration a bit. We have several modes to choose from to get our desired taste, which I really appreciate. First, we have the standard mode, which takes advantage of the display's wide gamut, but it makes content look really oversaturated, and the white point is too cool, so all the colors look a bit on the cool side. Then we've got the sRGB mode, which is meant to be the color accurate mode. So this mode takes sRGB content like we have on the Android operating system, web content, even YouTube videos, basically all consumer content, and this mode makes it look the way that it should. As for how accurate OnePlus was at creating this color profile, they're pretty close with the primary color coordinates, red, green, and blue, except red is lacking a little bit. I also found that the white point is a little too warm at 6,000 to 6,200 Kelvin, depending on the brightness. The gamma is a little high, and when the gamma is high, this darkens and saturates the colors a bit. The colors and their saturations within this sRGB standard are not perfect, but not completely off. Let's just call this an okay sRGB mode. Then we have the P3 mode, which is designed to work on content with a greater P3 range of color. If you're viewing sRGB content on the P3 mode, it's going to oversaturate those colors, but still many people find this pleasing to the eye. When looking at how closely this calibration standard matches P3, it's close. It shares a lot of the errors of the sRGB mode, so the white point is too warm and the gamma is a bit too high. So this mode's okay, but they could have done better. Next, we have the adaptive mode. The white point adjusts depending on the ambient lighting. When I went and did my measurements, I typically saw that it was at 6,500 Kelvin, and this is actually the best white point that they have on any of their calibration modes. So this means that white looks white, not too warm and not too cool. Yes, it's oversaturated, I just deal with it. But I would say that this mode looks the best. Then lastly, there is the custom color mode, which is also very oversaturated, but it lets you make white point adjustments so you can choose how warm or how cool this color mode looks. I honestly don't pay it any attention. Now, how does it look with dark scenes in movies? I can see that the grayscale luminance and shadows is darker than it should be, as we should be able to see all the way down to 0 on this chart. But the transition to black is pretty smooth, so I don't see much noticeable shadow clipping, also known as black crush. It's not perfect, but it's definitely better than what Samsung offered with the Galaxy S9 and S9 Plus this year. Those had terrible shadow clipping. Now moving right along to talking about cameras, we have a dual camera setup on the back. Now the main camera is 16 megapixels and the secondary camera is 20 megapixels. And interestingly, the secondary camera is only used to provide depth information for the portrait mode and to help enhance detail in photos from the main camera. So let's look a bit at image quality. I've actually been pretty impressed with the daylight images. I find that colors look great. I found that dynamic range often turned out surprising, especially for skies. Those clouds look really beautiful and dramatic, but have no issues with burned highlights. So they did a really good job there. I'd say that overall I didn't expect to like the results this much. It's not perfect, but it's good enough to where I'm not afraid to use this camera as my daily camera. My one gripe is that it can oversmooth details at times. Now as for low light, this is a different story. It's still not as good as competitors, and I didn't expect that. The P20 Pro wins here hands down, followed by the S9 and the LG G7. But as for how it does compared to the 5T before it, I find that the improvement is marginal, but any improvement is good when it comes to low light. So OnePlus says that we now have a 19% larger sensor and we've got optical image stabilization. So when going out and taking a bunch of pictures, I can see that the results are constantly a bit brighter than the 5T, and they're also a bit less processed for noise reduction, which is including smoothing and sharpening. And I also sometimes notice that the results are a bit sharper and not artificially, with more detail, and this is due to the optical image stabilization. So is there an improvement? Yes. Is it worth it? Mostly. Then looking at other scenarios such as macro low light photos, the auto mode can't autofocus worth a darn. But it can autofocus just fine in the manual mode. I grabbed the 5T and did the same tests, and the 5T has no issues in the same circumstances, so they should be able to fix this autofocus issue. Then we also have modes like the portrait mode, and I actually found this to be very proficient and I really like using it. I found that we have a nice bokeh effect with decent edge detection, and surprisingly it looks natural enough. Plus, when you get the mirror black finish, framing portrait selfies is a snap. We've also got a super type of slow motion mode like the other flagships out on the market right now, and spec-wise it's not up to par with 960 frames per second of competitors. But it actually makes a lot of sense at 480 frames per second, as I can film for much, much longer and not miss my moment. It works fantastically in bright lighting. Then looking at video recording, I already made a video discussing the quality, stabilization, and things most people probably don't know, as OnePlus did not make them obvious in the specs. So please watch that. I'm going to link it right here. Now as for connectivity, the thing that makes a phone, the OnePlus 6 is dual SIM, so you can use 2 different SIM cards at the same time. And I find that this feature is really good for traveling, so you can keep your SIM from home to keep your phone number, and then you can grab a data SIM from abroad so you can get fast data. That works really, really well. I haven't had any issues with Wi-Fi or GPS, and I've actually found GPS to be really accurate even for walking, which I appreciated a lot when I was in the UK trying to get around. So no issues with connectivity that I could point out. What about updates? And I've actually been really excited to see that OnePlus has officially announced a software maintenance schedule. So if they stick to this, and I think that they're going to, this makes these phones worth having in a sea of Android phones that rarely get updates. So this was extremely exciting to see, and this is what they say. There's going to be 2 years of regular software updates from the release date of the phones, including new features, Android versions, Android security patches, and bug fixes, as well as an additional year of Android security patch updates every 2 months. So we're going to be having 3 years of security updates every 2 months. Here's to hoping that they stick to this. This is really fantastic. To me, this means that you can buy with confidence, and it's just not going to be abandoned. Then lastly, what about battery life? So we've got a 3,300 milliamp hour battery inside the OnePlus 6, and just on a daily basis, the battery life is okay. I can get through the day, but if I start using it heavily, I need to top off. But honestly, with the OnePlus 6, topping off the battery is no big deal whatsoever. This phone charges insanely fast. And another cool feature is that even when the display is on, it's still continuing to charge quickly. That's unlike many other smartphones that end up slowing to a crawl with charging once the display is on. Charging, no problem whatsoever. So now, in conclusion, this phone is actually pretty phenomenal to me. Yes, it doesn't have a submersion rating, though you actually can splash it. It doesn't have a Quad HD screen, which really isn't needed, and it actually has its own definite graphical advantages to not having Quad HD+. I find that the screen looks just great as it is. I just wish they were a little bit more accurate with their sRGB mode. It doesn't have stereo speakers, which is a bummer. That is the biggest bummer to me with this phone, especially as the single bottom firing speaker is kind of quiet and really nothing to write home about. But still, the other features make it worth it for what it is. It's fast, it's cheaper than many flagships, has a lot of nice features while not just packing in a bunch of features that you're never going to use. It's a phone I grab on my free time just because I simply love using it. So this has been Erica, the technology nerd who likes to film stuff. If you like the work that I do, make sure to give me a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit that notification bell to see more videos like this. And also make sure to share this video because the YouTube subscription system is broken and a lot of people who want to see my videos sometimes don't get to see them. Let me know what you guys think about the OnePlus 6 or if you bought it already and how much you like it. So have a good night, you guys. Bye!